The morning light over London felt unusually gentle. The sky above Kensington Palace carried that pale golden hue that seems to appear only when something important is about to happen. Outside the palace gates, a sea of cameras, flags, and murmuring voices waited in almost reverent silence. It had been months since the world had seen the Princess of Wales. Her absence had filled tabloids, newsrooms, and dinner-table conversations with endless speculation. But today, the waiting ended. Inside, Kate Middleton stood before a mirror. Her reflection was calm but alive with emotion. The soft blue dress chosen for this moment seemed to glow in the light slipping through tall windows. A lady-in-waiting adjusted the edge of the fabric, whispering something reassuring. Kate's smile appeared, gentle, a little nervous, but sincere. Behind her, Prince William watched quietly. His expression held both pride and concern. For weeks he had balanced duty and care, family and nation, always aware that this day would come. In the courtyard, royal staff rehearsed the order of the procession. Security officers checked every route twice. Photographers tightened straps, ready to capture the image that would travel the world. The door opened. A hush fell over the courtyard as Kate stepped into view. The sound of camera shutters exploded like applause. For a brief second, she closed her eyes, breathing, grounding herself, and then she smiled. Reporters called her name, but she didn't rush. Her pace was measured, elegant. Every gesture reminded the world why she had become a symbol of composure. A little girl in the crowd lifted a handmade sign. "We missed you, Princess Kate." The sight softened her eyes. She waved gently, her hand trembling just enough to reveal the weight of the moment. William joined her side, and together they walked toward the waiting car. The image, the prince and princess reunited, felt like the restoration of something sacred. At Westminster, where the charity event was held, banners fluttered in the autumn wind. Crowds lined the streets 5 people deep. Police struggled to contain the excitement. As the couple arrived, cheers rolled through the air. "Welcome back," voices shouted. Some cried openly. Many simply stared, unable to believe she was truly there again. Inside the venue, the atmosphere shifted from chaos to warmth. The event honored medical workers, an irony not lost on anyone present. Kate shook hands, spoke softly, thanked them for their courage. Her words, though simple, carried the weight of someone who understood vulnerability. Television networks around the globe cut live to the scene. Anchors spoke of grace and strength, of recovery and hope. Social media flooded with clips of her first smile. Behind the curtain, while the speeches unfolded, Kate sat for a moment of quiet. The applause outside filtered through the heavy drapes like distant thunder. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself again. William touched her shoulder. "You're doing perfectly," he murmured. She nodded, eyes bright. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, King Charles watched the broadcast from his study. A faint, relieved smile crossed his face. "She's back," he said softly to Camilla. The nation needed this. Outside the venue, royal correspondents spoke into microphones, their words tumbling over each other, phrases like, "iconic return," "a moment of unity," "the heartbeat of the monarchy." Within hours, the images circled the globe. News tickers scrolled her name across screens from London to New York, from Delhi to Tokyo. In pubs, offices, and living rooms, people who had never met her felt an unexpected comfort. It was as if her reappearance signaled that the world, fragile and uncertain, could still mend itself. For Kate, the day moved in waves of emotion. Each handshake, each camera flash, felt surreal yet affirming. A brief drizzle fell outside as the event concluded. She stepped back into the gray afternoon, unbothered by the rain. The droplets clung to her hair, sparkling like tiny crowns. The ride back to the palace was quiet. William held her hand. Neither spoke much. Words weren't needed. When they arrived, she paused on the steps and looked up at the balcony. The same place she had once waved on her wedding day. The memories pressed against her chest, old joys, new strength. Inside, palace staff clapped softly. It was spontaneous, genuine, human. Kate's eyes welled with tears, but she managed a smile. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, London glittered. The palace windows glowed like lanterns above the park. From newsrooms to social feeds, one sentence echoed, "She's back, and stronger than ever." Yet as the city slept, another layer of the story waited to unfold. The quiet conversations, the letters, the shadows of curiosity about what truly happened during her long silence. The first day of her return had ended, but the questions had only begun. And in that calm before another media storm, Kate stood at her window, gazing at the lights beyond the palace gates, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll face them all." The palace corridors were unusually alive that evening. A quiet excitement hummed through the staff as news from the charity event replayed on every screen. Footmen moved briskly, flowers were being arranged again in the main hall as if the building itself wished to welcome her home. Kate and William entered through the side gate to avoid another wave of cameras. The car door opened, and a faint cheer still reached them from the distant road. Inside, the marble hallway gleamed beneath crystal lights. A senior aide stepped forward. "Your Royal Highness, everything went beautifully," he said, voice full of pride. Kate thanked him, her tone calm and warm. They made their way toward the private drawing room where the family waited. The smell of tea and the faint sound of a clock filled the space with domestic peace. King Charles rose first when they entered. His face broke into a wide, honest smile. "Catherine, my dear," he said softly, extending his hands. She curtsied lightly before he drew her into a brief, heartfelt embrace. "It's good to have you back," he murmured. "The country's been smiling all day." Camilla joined them, commenting on how radiant Kate looked. "You've lifted the spirit of this house," she said. William stood nearby, silently grateful for the warmth. For months he had carried a tension that now began to ease. Servants brought in tea and sandwiches. Laughter returned to the royal sitting room for the first time in weeks. At one point, Charles gestured toward the television screen still tuned to BBC News. The broadcast replayed the moment Kate greeted the little girl with the sign. "That one picture," the king said, "will be in tomorrow's papers everywhere." Kate smiled shyly, almost embarrassed. "She reminded me why we do this," she replied. Downstairs, press secretaries fielded calls from editors requesting statements. Headlines were already forming. "Grace returns to the palace. Hope for the monarchy. Princess Kate, symbol of strength." Outside the palace walls, crowds lingered in the dark, hoping for one more glimpse. Candles appeared along the fence, small points of light against the iron bars. Inside, the mood softened. Kate excused herself for a few minutes and wandered into the long gallery lined with portraits of monarchs and consorts from centuries past. The faces seemed to watch her, each carrying its own story of duty and endurance. She stopped before a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. The resemblance was faint but the aura familiar, calm, unshaken leadership. Kate whispered under her breath, "I hope I can be as steady." Footsteps approached. It was William. "You already are," he said quietly. They shared a smile that needed no explanation. In another wing of the palace, staff compiled letters and gifts sent by the public. Thousands had arrived. Handmade cards, sketches, prayers written on folded paper. Some were from schoolchildren, others from hospital wards. Later that night, Kate and William sat by the fire in their private quarters. The sound of rain brushed against the windows. "She didn't think they'd remember," William said, referring to one of the letters from a young fan. "They always remember kindness," Kate replied. A silence settled between them, comfortable and real. The firelight painted soft gold over their faces. Meanwhile, across Britain, news programs discussed every frame of the day. Analysts spoke about the importance of continuity, empathy, and the human side of royalty. At newspapers, editors debated which photo would go on the front page. Some chose her wave in the rain, others, the moment she looked at the little girl. Abroad, international correspondents sent their reports. From Washington to Sydney, her reappearance was treated as a story of resilience. In the palace press office, a young aide read aloud a message from the Prime Minister's office congratulating the princess on her return to public life. Elsewhere in the palace, Charles met briefly with his private secretary. "She's handled it beautifully," he said. "Tomorrow we'll have more requests, I'm sure." At that same hour, lights glowed in the staff quarters as they discussed the day over late dinners. Everyone, from gardeners to security teams, felt proud to serve on a day that had gone right. Kate, meanwhile, stepped out onto the balcony before bed. The rain had stopped, the air smelled of autumn leaves. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement below. She heard faint applause still rising from the gathered crowd outside, a sound like distant waves. William joined her, placing a coat over her shoulders. "You did well," he said. "I just want life to feel normal again," she whispered. "It will," he assured. "One day at a time." They stood together in silence, two figures outlined against the soft glow of London, neither royal title nor public duty able to hide the simple humanity of the moment. Inside, the palace clocks chimed midnight. Another chapter had quietly begun, one filled with new expectations, but also renewed faith. By sunrise the next morning, London was already awake with headlines. Newsstands filled the pavements, the front pages were an ocean of blue dresses and radiant smiles. "Hope returns to the palace," read one. Another simply said, "Welcome back, Kate." Television anchors replayed the footage again and again. Each time, viewers noticed new details, the glint of raindrops on her sleeve, the small child's sign, the steady way she held herself beside William. At breakfast tables across Britain, people lingered over their tea, reading every column. Commentators described it as the moment that stitched the nation's spirit back together. In Scotland, a retired nurse told reporters that watching the princess thank hospital workers had brought her to tears. "She knows what it means to fight for health," the woman said. Outside Kensington Palace, crowds had returned, not to demand answers this time but to leave flowers. Some bouquets carried notes of gratitude, others simply said, "We're proud of you." Inside the palace communications office, aides sorted through thousands of messages. There were formal letters from heads of state, but also handwritten cards from children, whose spelling barely held together yet whose words overflowed with affection. The social media storm was unstoppable. Within hours, clips of her appearance had been viewed tens of millions of times. Hashtags praising her resilience trended across continents. Major magazines rushed to commission special editions. Editorial teams argued over which photograph captured her best. One editor remarked, "She's not just back, she's symbolic of steadiness itself." At Buckingham Palace, King Charles held a brief morning meeting. "Let's make sure she's not overburdened," he instructed. "The message we send must be gratitude, not spectacle." Royal correspondents outside the gates delivered their live reports. Raincoat collars turned up against the wind, they spoke of grace, poise, and the quiet confidence that had re-energized the monarchy's image. Across the Atlantic, U.S. networks framed the event as the royal return Britain needed. Talk shows dissected her gestures and tone. Analysts compared her influence to the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II, drawing lines of continuity between past and present. In Australia, the morning news described her as a bridge between tradition and the modern world. Japanese papers printed stills of her smile alongside the caption, "The Princess of Strength." Meanwhile, William prepared for another engagement. As he buttoned his jacket, he paused to glance at a tablet streaming the news. The anchor spoke of the genuine affection visible between the royal couple. He smiled faintly, then turned to his schedule. Kate spent part of her morning reviewing letters in her study. One note from a children's hospital invited her to visit once she felt ready. Another came from a group of midwives who wrote, "Your courage gives us courage." Her eyes softened as she read. The connection between her and the people felt tangible, almost electric. By midday, the palace press office released a short statement thanking the public for its kindness and reaffirming the couple's commitment to charitable work. It ended with the line, "The Princess of Wales is deeply moved by your support." Within minutes, news sites around the world published the statement. It trended everywhere. Economists even noted a small boost in consumer confidence that day, proof, some said, that the mood of the nation had shifted. At lunchtime in London cafes, television screens showed montages of the previous day's event set to orchestral music. Patrons watched silently, smiles tugging at their faces. In Parliament, several MPs mentioned her return during debates, describing it as a reminder of stability in challenging times. Later that afternoon, a short clip surfaced from an on-street interview. A teenage girl holding a phone said, "She's my role model. She came back stronger. That means we can, too." The clip went viral. By evening, analysts on late-night news panels discussed how her authenticity cut through cynicism. One historian said, "She represents duty without arrogance, that's why people respond." As dusk fell, the city lights blinked on again. Reporters packed up their cameras, though many lingered, expecting another glimpse. From her office window, Kate watched the sunset over the palace gardens. The golden light caught the rooftops, turning them to bronze. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of calm that wasn't forced. Elsewhere, newspaper presses thundered into the night, rolling out millions of copies. The world would wake once more to her face and to the story of renewal it carried. Behind the scenes, palace advisors reviewed the coming week's engagements carefully, mindful of balance. They wanted her return to unfold gently, not like a spectacle but like a rhythm rediscovered. In one quiet corridor, William and Kate crossed paths with a small team carrying stacks of mail. They paused to help steady the boxes, laughing softly. It was an ordinary moment, almost domestic, yet symbolic of everything the public loved about them. At that same time, lights in newsrooms dimmed as editors finally signed off on tomorrow's editions. Someone remarked, "This feels like the calm after a storm, one that left us hopeful instead of tired." Outside, rain began again, soft, rhythmic, familiar. And as London drifted toward sleep, the headlines printed hours earlier whispered across the city from every stand, echoing one shared sentiment: "She's back, and Britain feels whole again." The winter morning broke over London, and Buckingham Palace gleamed beneath the pale sunlight. Crowds had thinned overnight, but their devotion remained carved into the silence. A young girl placed a single lily by the palace gate, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Inside, the corridors hummed softly with calm after weeks of tension. Kate walked through them with quiet steps, her reflection gliding beside her on the polished floors. The world outside might still be loud, but within, there was peace. William followed her gently, keeping a respectful distance, his eyes filled with awe. He watched his wife not as the Princess of Wales, but as the woman who carried grace even in recovery. Every staff member who crossed her path paused, bowing slightly, sensing something momentous. Her presence had become a symbol, not of luxury, but of endurance. In the royal study, the king awaited. Charles rose slowly as Kate entered, emotion flickering through his composed demeanor. He extended his hands, she took them without hesitation. No words were exchanged, only a nod that carried generations of understanding. For the first time in months, the king's shoulders seemed lighter. "Welcome home," he finally whispered. Kate smiled, softly, graciously. The air between them seemed to glow with mutual respect and relief. Across the room, Camilla watched silently, her expression unreadable yet gentle. The moment was both personal and historical. Outside the palace, the press waited for an official statement. The BBC anchor's voice trembled with emotion as she described the royal calm after the storm. International headlines echoed the same sentiment: "Grace returns, hope for the monarchy, Kate inspires the world." On social media, millions of posts overflowed with joy and admiration. The hashtag welcome back princess topped trends for days. Clips of her brief appearance replayed endlessly, accompanied by soft piano music and heartfelt captions. Even critics found themselves moved by the authenticity of her demeanor. This was not spectacle, it was sincerity. Later that evening, as the palace lights glowed against the dusk, Kate and William appeared on the balcony once more. They waved not as figures of authority, but as a couple grounded by trials and faith. The crowd roared, a sound that seemed to carry straight into the heart of the city. Flags waved, flashlights twinkled, and someone began to sing, "God Save the King." Kate's eyes glistened. She leaned slightly toward William, whispering something only he could hear. He smiled, resting his hand over hers for just a second. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about resilience and love. Inside the palace nursery, their children watched from a window, clutching small Union Jacks. George's expression was proud, Charlotte's, radiant, Louis clapped until his cheeks flushed red. Nannies and attendants smiled quietly, aware they were witnessing history shaped not by power, but by heart. Somewhere in the background, the royal anthem played, softer, slower, almost like a lullaby. For the first time in years, the monarchy felt human. Again, a family had weathered storms and stood together in the light. As night fell, London's skyline shimmered beneath a clear moon. The palace stood not as a fortress of secrecy but as a beacon of endurance. From Windsor to Edinburgh, bells tolled in harmony, marking the return of stability. Church candles flickered in silent gratitude. The Archbishop's message, broadcast nationwide, spoke of faith, family, and fortitude. It was more than religion, it was reflection. People in pubs raised glasses to her health, children drew pictures of the royal balcony in school. For once, a royal story united rather than divided. Kate's journey had become everyone's metaphor, a reminder that grace survives even under fire. Weeks later, the royal calendar resumed with quiet dignity. Charities resumed visits, engagements reappeared on the schedule. Every appearance, though brief, was met with genuine affection. She moved carefully, measured yet luminous. Each smile, each word spoken publicly, carried renewed meaning. It was not a performance, it was healing in motion. The press, often critical, began using phrases like, return of authenticity. For the monarchy, long criticized as distant, her presence had become a bridge. A bridge between past and present, tradition and compassion. As spring arrived, the gardens at Kensington bloomed wildly. Reporters captured photos of tulips reflecting in puddles, labeling them, the flowers of resilience. Kate was seen walking with her children, dressed simply, laughing softly, no grand entourage, no excess. It was those small, unguarded moments that won hearts across continents. Royal watchers spoke of a new era, the era of empathy. And though the palace offered no grand declarations, actions spoke louder. Each gesture, each public step, became part of a narrative of recovery and renewal. Even critics conceded, she has changed the way we see royalty. By summer, her first major charity event drew record attendance. The theme was mental health awareness, a cause deeply personal to her. She spoke with conviction, her tone calm but powerful. Every sentence resonated with the weight of experience and sincerity. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted minutes. No one saw a princess that day, they saw a human being who had overcome. The next morning's papers were unanimous, a royal reborn. Photographs of her radiant smile filled front pages worldwide. In that light, the monarchy seemed timeless again. Grace had returned, but it was stronger now, tempered by reality. That evening, the palace balcony lights dimmed. Kate stood by the window, looking out at the city she had once feared to face. Now, it seemed to embrace her completely. William joined her quietly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Neither spoke, they didn't need to. Beyond the glass, London sparkled like a promise kept. Somewhere below, faint echoes of cheers still lingered in the air. For the world, the story of recovery had ended. For them, it was only beginning. And so, beneath the crown and beyond the title, Kate simply smiled. A woman reborn into grace, forever cherished by a nation that had finally learned to feel again.